Hey coaches, Coach Simpson, appreciate you tuning in to my YouTube channel. This video is going to be about organizing practice, some tips to organizing a football practice, whatever level you're at. Will not be very specific towards my scheme. It's more of a general idea, as a lot of coaches now may be wrapping up their season and looking at ways of running a more efficient practice in the future. So there's a couple of key questions you got to go through that we're going to walk through, and then we're going to talk about the different stages of team practice. If you want a lot more details, whether you run what I run or anyone does, I've got actually an organizational manual that goes through and talks about different ways to organize your entire offense. And that can be from practices, obviously, to scheme, to install and all that stuff. So you got to think about on the front end so that you're not into late season and not running efficient practices. All right, so the first few questions you need to ask when you want to run a practice with your team. I get a lot of these questions of how do we practice with X, Y, or Z. So these are the different things you need to go through on the front end. First thing you got to decide as a program, I don't know what your numbers look like. Are you going to be one or two-way team? Are you going to have guys that primarily focus on offense and guys that primarily focus on defense and never the two shall meet? Or are you going to have guys that, hey, we're mainly an offensive lineman, but we may have to use this guy on defensive line, or we're the quarterback, but we might be a nickel DB. So you have one or two-way, or you could even put in there kind of the 1.5 ways. When you organize your practice schedule, if you decide to go with one-way players, we have always built in what we call a crossover period. So basically, between the periods of individual and pod work, we're going to have a crossover. So if you're an offensive guy, you go to individual offense. A defensive guy goes to individual defensive drills, and then have a 5 to 10 minute period where the players that are on offense get a defensive skill or a scheme period, and the defensive players maybe get an offensive skill or a scheme period. And we've even used that kind of crossover-ish period where we may be training a guard to play tackle, or maybe playing a quarterback to play receiver, or playing a safety to play linebacker. So that way we're kind of getting guys multiple reps where they can go, because as everyone learned during COVID, you better have a good second, third, or fourth option at multiple spots to be successful. But you got to make that decision first. If you decide to go one way with a little crossover period, it should be, your practices should never go over about 1.5 hours to 40 minutes if you're running them efficiently. If you're going with two-way guys, which is what we have now at Southside, our practices usually run about 1:40 to maybe 1:50. Early in the year, it might have been 2 hours as we had to spend a little more time kind of going through things. That's kind of a time period that you can judge based on how you have guys. Some of y'all I know don't even have a choice. Everybody's going two ways. Probably going to end up being a longer practice simply because everybody's got to get multiple skills. Second thing you got to talk about is scheme. You know, what are you going to run offensively and defensively? Once you figure out, okay, we're going to be a spread team, or we're going to be a wing T team, we're going to be an option team, or defensively, you know, we're going to be kind of an umbrella coverage or a man cover, whatever you decide. There's a lot of scheme you can pick, but whatever the major scheme you're going to run needs to dominate inside of your practice schedules. You know, too many times, we'll talk about individual here in a minute, or we're going to see a team that's primarily zone, but during their individual time, they're spending a lot of time working on man coverage. Well, you're not really going to run that, but maybe 10% of the time. So that only needs to be run in practice 10% of the time. You know, the percentages need to match up. If we're going to be a running team, we're going to run the ball a lot. That we don't need to spend 30 minutes doing 7-on-7 every day if that's not really what we're going to be about in the game. Or if we are going to throw it, then we need to build that in. The final thing to think about is how you're going to work in special teams. You know, we tend to start off every practice with a special T period. So snappers, holders, kickers, punters are kind of getting, as we're getting warm. The guys that are not involved in that group, you always have to find a way. We usually will steal some offensive line time for them, because generally the guys that aren't snappers, holders, kickers, punters, returners are linemen. So they get a little time. When I was at Searcy, we would take defensive guys and do a tackling kind of circuit with them so that you're only standing around. But you need to figure out how are you going to organize special teams, practicing the skill and then practicing the actual team. You know, I've always tried to do a heavy dose of special teams on Monday, cherry pick 2 on Tuesday, 2 on Wednesday, and review them all on Thursday. You know, now that I'm back at Southside, our head coach now enjoys kind of working them randomly into the schedule. So Monday might be a big install, but then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we may hit 3 of them randomly put into practice so we can go through them. Either way you go is right, but you need to have a plan for how you do that. So that's the front end of all the stuff we got to organize up front. Now we can actually turn to that sheet of paper we're making as a practice schedule. First of all, I would encourage you very heavily to come up with your own template. I've got some templates on my website that are just Excel sheets over at fbcoachsimpson.com. I think they're like $2. You can go there and download one and then manipulate it however you want to. But whatever you do, you need to have an organized plan at practice. Those without a plan are not going to have a good practice. And if you have a plan, you at least can kind of know what you're trying to accomplish. Okay? Inside of your practice schedule, these are the 4 basic components that I try to use of a practice schedule. And I try to do them in this order. As the year goes on, we start to shorten these periods and start to lengthen these periods or keep them the same. As the season is early, we're heavy on these periods and then usually a little lighter on those because we're installing plays. We don't have a lot of plays, so you're not got a lot of team. Okay? Inside of individual drills, one of the things, let's go back over here, you got to come over here to this scheme in this 1 or 2 way. That's how you're going to build that. If you're going to have, we like to run all of our individual up front. So if we have 2-way players, we'll do individual offense, give a quick break, individual defense, give a quick break, and we'll move on. That's kind of how we have scheduled it this year. If you have 1-way players, this field may be split. If you go watch teams that are larger teams, field is split, Indy O, Indy D, you're kind of doing, we'll do a little crossover. But inside of individual, what I really wanted to focus on was make sure you're teaching skills that are going to show up on a Friday night and the kids understand how they show up on a Friday night. You know, inside of individuals, doing tackling, yeah, that's a skill everyone needs to know. But what are the areas of tackling maybe we struggle with that we can incorporate in this? Or if we're doing blocking, every line's got to do some kind of blocking drill. You know, but what drill are we using the most of the time? That comes over to that scheme question. You know, if we're going to be a wing T based team, which we are, we want to work down blocking more times than we want to work double teams because we don't double team as much as we down block. So that needs to show up in this individual time. We don't need a whole lot of just double team and, you know, getting on the board drill stuff. There's nothing wrong with those drills, but they just keep them in the amount of time needed for what you want to use. Same thing with other skills. You know, if you are gonna, we have receivers in our system this year. We've thrown the ball, you know, not very much, maybe 10, 15 times a game at most. So, you know, their individual time, they are going to catch balls. They're receivers. They are going to run routes. But we also are going to build in a blocking period because they do a lot of that, a lot of motion. And so that needs to match the skill that's going to show up on Friday night. Second period we have done, which is a little different for us, we just call it pod time. Other people may call it a different deal. But it's where 2 position groups that maybe normally wouldn't work together, they do come together. We're wing T based, so a lot of our stuff is pulling guards. And so we're going to bring our guards with our running backs and kind of let them work on timing. We're going to have our quarterbacks maybe in there with them as well, with a quick tackle for us, working our RPO game. There's times we run our counter, where we'll bring our Y and our B with our F, and those will work together. And so they don't normally always come together, but they come together during this pod time. If you're a defensive side of the ball guy, it may be a time you bring your safeties to work with outside backers on run fit, you know, or on whatever it's going to be. Or perhaps it's your outside backers go with your defensive line because they're going to have to get in the 9 technique some. So basically it's time where your players are going to work with a position group they normally don't work with. We just call that pod time. Offensively, we usually budget 5 to 10 minutes a day. Defensively, it's usually maybe a little bit less depending on the team we're playing that week. Then we do group work. Group work is traditional 7-on-7 or inside run, and that can look different depending on your offense. If you're a spread offense, inside run, maybe 5 linemen, a running back, and a quarterback, inside run. If you're a wing T based, it may be your whole team except for 1 or 2 guys. And so you need to just adjust that as needed. Same thing with defense. You know, they're going to work group fits. So if we're playing a heavy pass team, that might be a blitz period or offensively blitz pickup period. And then on the other end of the field, we're doing 7-on-7. If we're playing a heavy run team, it may be every player except for a couple DBs working run fits and inside drill, and then the DBs that have to cover reviewing routes on the other end of the field. So we kind of adjust that. Final one is team. In team, I think a lot of times gets overlooked. Obviously, you need to script everything you do in team. I'm a firm believer of that on both sides of the ball. Just print off 15 plays and give it to a young coach and say, run these. You need to have kind of an order you want them run, on a hash and a place in the field you want them run defensively. And then offensively, to us, every single snap is a situation. So we generally start off with what I call hash work, which is going to be our base plays, but we're not going to run them from the middle of the field. So we'll rotate left hash, middle, right, and maybe do 7 or 8 plays as a 5-minute period there. We're running our base stuff, but we're not just putting the ball to 40 and snapping from there in the middle of the field, and then we get in the game and don't recognize how to let the hash work for us. Second thing we're going to work on a lot of times is situational football. So we will work red zone period. We work red zone period 2 days a week. Usually it's going to be on Tuesday and Wednesday, our heavier days. And we don't just want our coaches to know kind of what our red zone plays are. We want our players to know the same thing. So we get down the red zone. These are plays now we've practiced on Tuesday. We probably trimmed a few out again on Wednesday. And then on Thursday run through, we have another period of red zone. That's the part of the game you're going to win or lose. We want to work that a lot. Same thing with third downs. So a third down period, usually for us, we're going to do third and shorts one day, third and medium to long one day, and then all the third downs on that Thursday kind of go through. And then we're also going to work a time management drill. We are not a huge up-tempo team. We can, but we want to work against the clock and understand all that stuff, or work to kill the clock. So we're going to work those different time management skills. We do that 3 days a week, and it could be a lot of times it's just on air, but it's just so our kids get used to, all right, we got to get up here, we got to kill the ball, we got to get out of bounds, here's what we want to run, we don't want to be running a lot of motion, all the different tips and tricks that we want them to go through. We want to work all of those. It really has paid off for us the last year. We've now 2 for 1, which means we've scored at the end of a half and then scored at the beginning of the next half, 6 different opponents this season in 10 games. And a lot of that I attribute to this. We've also scored kind of into the game points in 2 games, I believe, that helped us either win that game or pull that game close. So those have been different things that we've really worked in our team period. Again, I've got a lot more information, a whole book full, in my organizational manual. It was like this, and it's over at fbcoachsimpson.com. There's also a couple videos there on situational football. And then, of course, if you don't already know, if you're a big gun T guy, the clinic is coming up in February. There's a link down in the website. You can read more about it. Sign up if you're interested in coming. It's going to be pretty awesome. Already starting to fill up on the live portion. So if you want to come for the live, I would recommend you go ahead and reserve your spot. And we'll have a virtual option as well. 19 sessions worth of deep dive into that offense. And we will be dealing with practice organization, actually walking through a live practice for the guys who are able to come. Appreciate your time. If you haven't already done so, I would appreciate if you'd like the video, subscribe to the channel, as I'm trying to grow this channel. Thank you.